Welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Shoots Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on in Billings Public Schools. And this week this month I'm very excited to have Kevin Brook with us. Kevin is a middle school counselor. I'm not sure if there's a scarier job title in all of America, but I think middle school counselor might be it. So Kevin, thanks for taking the time to come on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we're going to talk all about middle school and middle school counseling. Before we do that, let's learn a little bit about you. Did you grow up here in the area? Did you come to the area? Give us some background, some history.
Well, I did not grow up here. I wasn't born here. I was actually born in Kansas, northeast corner of the state. Went to high school at a little school there, about 300 kids. My mom still lives back there, as does the rest of my family. Graduating class was under 60 kids, and I always had this fascination with Montana. For some reason, I'd never been here.
Yeah.
Didn't travel much as a kid, but I always was really excited about Montana for some reason. And I was in college, and that I guess that interest in Montana just grew and grew. And right after college, I did go to college out in Philadelphia. So I went from Kansas to Philadelphia, and after that, I spent a year on the road as a traveling salesperson, which was an interesting life for a year.
Yeah.
I got to see a lot of the country. Never went to Montana during that time.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I was looking at jobs for working with kids, working nonprofit. My undergrad is in theology, and I just loved working with people, and I knew I wanted to work with kids. And so I saw this ad, and I remember exactly where I was. I didn't have a laptop. I'd haul my computer in, and I was looking at different jobs, and it said youth intern, Billings, Montana, $400 a month plus room and board. And I quit my job to come out for the interview.
Wow.
I didn't have a position. This was in '96. There was no guaranteed position, nothing, but I knew I wanted to go to Montana. And I came out, interviewed for the position, got offered it. I think they just thought, well, this isn't much of a risk at $400 a month.
Yeah.
And so they hired me. I worked for CLDI for 2 years. In that process, I met my wife. She was a teacher. Right after we got married, then I decided to go back to school. I went to MSU Billings and got my master's in school counseling. And right after that, I was hired by the school district as a high school counselor.
Okay. So give us a little bit of rundown of your experience within School District 2 then, from where you started as a high school counselor to where you are now today.
Yeah, I've been at this for 20 years. It's really weird to say that. I have been at the high school. I was at the high school for about half of that time, and then I've been at Lewis for this is my 8th year at Lewis and Clark.
Sure.
I fell in love with that age group. I had been coaching wrestling while I was a high school counselor. I was coaching wrestling at the middle school, and I just fell in love with that age group. As odd and awkward as they are, I just loved that age group, and I said, if there's ever an opening, and I knew I wanted to work at Lewis and Clark, because I'd been coaching there, and an opening came up, and I transferred there, and it's been a great deal. I really have enjoyed it.
So tell us, what is your role as a middle school counselor? What is it that you kind of do day in and day out? What are you there to facilitate at Lewis and Clark?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I think if we were to boil it down, to narrow it down to what it is about, the job is relational. The job is building relationships with staff, building relationships with kids, with parents, with other stakeholders that are interested in what you have going on at your school. And that may be, someone, hey, we want to help out. We want to do a food drive. We want to help a kid who needs this or that, or we want to partner with you on some initiative.
Sure.
So it is about building relationships, and then it's also about meeting a kid where they're at and embracing who they are, and just helping them try to figure out why things just don't feel right at this age, and is it going to get any better? And dealing with that meltdown and dealing with this mountain of like, oh my goodness, I have 50 missing assignments and I'm never going to pass and I'm going to be in middle school forever. So just, I guess, given some perspective too.
Sure.
Yeah.
How many other counselors work at Lewis and Clark then as well?
There are 2 of us.
Okay.
And we have about, we've averaged anywhere between 750 to 800. This year we're down a little bit. And when I say that number this year, we have a little over 700 this year. But that includes the 150 kids that we have who are remote.
Okay.
And so we each have around, 350 to 400. I work with Mackenzie Umamoto, who was a counselor at the high school prior to this year. And before that, I worked the last 7 years with Marcia Beaumont, who has become a very dear friend of mine. She retired at the end of last school year. I have stayed in touch with her, and I said, "You picked a great time to do that." So, yes.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's
so
for
we've
sure.
we've split it up. We used to split it up by grades. And
Yeah,
this
that was
year-
kind of my next question. How do you guys decide, okay, you take half of 6th grade, I'll take half of 6th grade, or I'll take 8th grade, or how do you guys decide what you want to do there?
That's what we used to do. We used to do, you would pick up half the 6th grade, each person, and then one person would have 7th grade, and they'd follow them through, and then you'd kind of rotate back, so you'd have them for 2 years. This year, what we've done is we've gone to alphabet, and so we have it broke up by alphabet. I have the first half of the alphabet, and then Mackenzie has the second half of the alphabet.
All right. And is there a better half of the alphabet? Do you know?
I think she probably has.
Maybe she knew what she was doing.
Yeah, I think she did. Yes.
So you've been there for a while, and I think during that time you switched from the 7-8 model to the 6-7-8 model.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that has changed the complexion of what's going on at the middle school.
Oh, boy, there is a tremendous maturity gap from a 6th grader to an 8th grader. It dawned on me a few years ago how young these 6th graders are. They're 11, Shoots, 11 years old.
Yeah.
I joke that I have like memorabilia, like an old T-shirt or something that is older than some of these kids. Like you did a race, or you're a part of this team or something. You're like, that T-shirt is older than these kids. Here's perspective. Our 6th graders, some of them still run to lunch. I mean, they're running down the hall. We're running to lunch, and 8th graders are kind of strolling in like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, just the maturity. And I think that sometimes we think, well, they're in middle school, they should be more mature. Well, that's a big age gap.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that at Lewis and Clark, the total number of students who are in the building hasn't really changed all that much. But with the opening of the 2 new middle schools, you're going to have some differences. And then, did the 6th graders go to, they're changing classes every period like you would in 8th grade, or are they have a longer stretch of classes?
No, that's been a hard thing for our 6th graders is that change all of the time, because they were, in the same classroom, and teachers may come in or they may go across the hall to another teacher when they were in elementary school. So that's been a big difference and a big change for them. But yeah, they're on the same rotation that the other grades are on as well.
All right.
So that's been an adjustment for them too, and trying to manage 6 teachers versus 1 or 2 when they were in elementary school. So that's been an adjustment for the kids and also the parents as well. So that's been hard.
What is your guys' role as guidance counselors to help them make that transition from, I'm used to being in 1, maybe 2 classrooms in 5th grade. Now I'm moving into 6th grade. Right. Man, look at all the older kids that are here. Look at all the... How do you guys help them make that change?
Sure.
And how long does it take them to kind of get the hang of things?
Yeah. Well, the really nice thing is that if they are in a class, it is with their same age peers. They're not in an elective class with 7th and 8th graders. They're not in a PE class playing dodgeball with a 6'3", 200-pound 8th grader, hucking a ball at them, and they're 75 pounds. So that's pretty nice in that they are with their same age peers, and so I guess our role in that is the communication piece, and talking with parents when they call, or we reach out to parents, or the kid just comes down and is just overwhelmed. Teachers do a really, really good job. We have a great 6th grade staff, and we always have at Lewis. And they do a really good job of communicating with parents and really talking them through that transition piece. And then we can come along and support. But hats off to those 6th grade teachers, because they do a great job with that.
Are we like a month into school when they're kind of getting it and this makes sense now and all the rules are set and I know what I'm supposed to do?
Yes, I'd say it takes about a month.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll see that same kid, day after day, and they just, you become their tether point, and then eventually they kind of, cut the string, and it's kind of sad. You're like, oh, my little guy or my little gal's not stopping by anymore.
Yeah.
But that's what you want.
Sure.
You want them to jump in.
Now let's talk about on the back end. What role do you guys play in getting those 8th graders transitioned over to high school, or is that going to fall all on those high school counselors?
Well, I think we have a good partnership with Senior and West. Most of our kids from Lewis go to Senior, but we do have a handful that will go out to West, and we work with both of those counseling departments. We do a pre-registration with our 8th going 9th grade, and so we talk about that registration process, and then there's a bit of a lull in there, so kids can go home and look at electives online, look at the course offering book if they choose to look at that, but most of them will jump online and look at what a course is. Give an opportunity for parents to have an input as well on that, and then usually about a week or two later, the counselors from the high school will come in and get them registered for high school. And it's really interesting dynamic in that usually after that registration, the 8th graders become really cool, like, hey, I'm going to high school now.
Yeah.
But then come about mid-April, it's like, oh, I don't want to leave. And so they kind of,
Yeah.
embrace their teachers and they don't want to leave. And so it's an interesting little dynamic that plays out every year.
Right. What role do you guys as guidance counselors play in helping students who are maybe not getting along with teachers, or teachers not getting along with students, or there's some dynamics going on there that just aren't working? What role do you guys play in that process?
Yeah. Well, we oftentimes will be that first call that parents maybe call up and say, hey, we're having a little bit of an issue with this situation, that situation, and usually it's a communication issue. And you got a lot of personalities in a building, and so some personalities just will clash naturally. So we do try to involve the parents in that, and we do try to, sometimes involve the administration as well, and certainly the teacher in that as well too, and really come to a place where we have, some type of agreement. And like I said, most of the time it's just a communication issue and an expectation issue. So. Yeah, we don't always facilitate the outcome that you think is going to happen at the beginning, but we're just there to listen and be an advocate for the kid and really just a non-partial person in that.
What about for kids who are they're just, I mean, I know it's an awkward age. It's an awkward age for everyone, and I'm sure probably one of the most difficult things is this just an awkward age, or is this kid really struggling? And how do you dissect that, and how do you know when, hey, this is just going to work out because they're 13, or this is not right and we need to get some intervention there? And how do you work with those kids that are really struggling at that time?
I always say this, and I tell people this all the time. When you're dealing with a pretty significant mental health issue, you never get a chance to replay it if they do major harm to themselves, or heaven forbid they take their life. And so err on the side of maybe bring in more than is needed, as opposed to chalking up like, well, it's just the age.
Right.
But I guess what happens is it comes with experience, and you realize, but at the same time, we're not therapists either, and so making that determination, and I would hate to be wrong in a situation where more support was needed, and so always err on the side of providing more than maybe is needed. involving the parents. I think that is crucial too, especially at this age. I know kids are. It may seem like they don't want anything to do with their parents, but the reality is oftentimes it's, hey, I want the attention of mom and dad.
Sure.
And so, not always, but.
Yeah. What are some of the resources that you guys do have or available to you? If you, based on experience, this isn't normal teenage behavior. This is something different. What are some of the resources available to you?
So on the mental health side, is that what you're?
Yes.
asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have a group of therapists that the district has, put together. There's a list of therapists, and we make those recommendations all the time. We'll give parents a list, like these are some options for you. We certainly encourage parents, if they feel like something else is going on that they need to see the pediatrician. We certainly make those suggestions as well.
Yeah. And then I believe School District 2 some time ago kind of implemented a suicide awareness process. Are you guys still using that? And then can you talk about maybe some of the successes you've seen from that?
Yeah, we do have that, and it's been really, really great. It's a great resource. We do an SOS presentation, a signs of suicide presentation to all of our sixth graders. And then they do it in the high school as well. And so that just opens communication with kids and with parents. And then we use the same form, a suicide form, even after the screening. If some kid presents as suicidal, and we take no chances with that. And like I said, we may be guilty of overreacting or over-responding, but yeah, if a kid even makes mention of it, we run them through it.
Sure.
At Lewis. Yeah. That's what we do. And we do have a lot of them. Right. I will say that week before the break, we had 4 or 5 screenings that we did with kids.
Yeah, and I know, last year was kind of we finished the year online, but it was a bit of a short run. This year, you've got kids back in school, you've got kids online. Have you noticed this year that their kids are more stressed? They're struggling more. What have you noticed this year about those kids who are dealing with the pandemic just like everybody else is? And I know everybody's stressed about it.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're all stressed about it. Yeah, there are some who are responding better than others to the pandemic, to having to wear a mask every day. I made mention to my wife just a few weeks ago, what I miss is seeing the smiles of kids and of our staff. They're laughing, but just to see their smiles like, oh yeah, we're humans underneath these masks. Yep. And that's been really difficult, just that one part of it. But yes, I think that you have a group of kids who are struggling more than others, and we are talking to them more than maybe we have in the past. But we certainly don't see them all. We do have a lot of kids and few resources, but we do have a lot of eyes in the building who are really keyed into that stuff as well.
Sure. What about your online students? How are you checking in with them? How are you making sure they're doing okay? Sure. How are you kind of keeping track of them versus, hey, I can grab that kid, because he's walking by today.
Right.
They're not walking by today, tomorrow, or even the next day.
Sure. Well, we have roughly 140 kids who are online out of that 700, so about 20% are online. And so we'll do some check-ins periodically, on the computer, or they'll send us an email, or we also have some remote counselors too that do some check-ins and some work with those kids as well. So yeah, that's. I wish we saw them more.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, that's.
Are you able to check in with then some of their online teachers as well and kind of find out how they're doing and maybe they could alert you to say, hey, Kevin's been showing up pretty regularly, but I know it's the last 2 weeks he really hasn't been in school.
Yes, we have those conversations with those online teachers as well, and we still have access to their grades in Power School, and we can monitor their progress as well.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
What's one thing you wish middle school kids knew about going to middle school?
This is not the rest of your life. this is an awkward time, and nobody ever looks back and says, "Oh, I wish I could repeat my middle school years. Like those were the best years of my life." So just, I guess, having a sense of humor about it and embracing that. And it really is a time of transition.
Yeah.
And, you know, so many changes going on just biologically. You're seeing friend groups change. You're seeing interests change. And just that, hey, this isn't the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah. What's one thing you wish parents knew about what it's like to go to middle school?
That your kids don't hate you. And that combative nature, that attitude, it isn't personal, though it may feel that way. Oftentimes it's a defense mechanism. That same little kid that you held in your arms, that same little kid that you patched up their skin knee and talked them through being afraid of the dark, is still in there.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure things out too. When it's going 100 miles an hour inside of here, and inside of here, and it's just hard. And so they lash out, and they lash out oftentimes more with the ones that they love. I guess the best advice I could give parents would be to embrace the odd, find some humor in it, and don't create new hills to die on.
Yeah.
Because that's only going to, if you change the expectation, move the goalpost, they're trying to figure out what's going on here,
Right.
and now you've changed it out here. That can send them into a bit of a tailspin.
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming it's probably easier for you, who is there every day with this age group. This is the age group you work with day in and day out. So you've seen them go from being that 6th grader to that 8th grader to now that senior kid, and they made it, you know.
Yes.
But as your own kid, you don't necessarily.
Right.
You're not necessarily seeing that.
That is absolutely true. I mean, just that experience. And I always tell parents, you love your kid way more than I could ever love your kid. And you see your kid in a totally different arena than I do, but just know that what your child is experiencing is pretty typical of this age. And then if they share more and I feel like that, hey, yeah, there is something more here, then we make those recommendations. But yeah, I get a lot of calls from parents that, you know, with kids like, what has happened? Like, what's going on? Is this normal? Totally normal. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me excited for those.
Right,
for
exactly.
those for that time.
Those
yes,
years.
I'm sure my daughter is going to be a model middle schooler.
Right.
Yes. What is something that you find that's not? I promise we'll get to the other side of this question when we're done. What do you find something that's not terribly rewarding about what you do with middle school kids?
Not terribly rewarding. That's a good question.
How about we start here? What do
Yeah.
you find the most rewarding about what you do with working with middle school kids?
I think at the end of the day, when they know that you love them and that you care about them and you want the very best for them, and that's the most rewarding, when there's an awareness that, hey, that guy cares about me,
Sure.
and he wants what's best for me.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not perfect. There are days when I lose my patience and I have to go back and say, hey, you didn't get the best of me today. I was impatient with you, and you know, going back, and I mean, it's yeah. And you think about the number of interactions you have in a day.
Yeah.
And if you have 100 and you hit 99 out of 100 is great. Well, that one negative will kind of eat your lunch, and so going back and correcting that with a kid, like that's on me. I wasn't as patient with you. I didn't give you the same respect that I maybe gave the previous 10.
Sure.
And so, coming back to that, and for them to see you as a human being who does make mistakes and has some shortcomings.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
So I guess the other part of your
Sure.
question is, what would be the
least rewarding.
least rewarding? I'm not so great at administrative stuff, and just those administrative tasks that
Sure.
that are just part of the job.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you just get through.
Yeah.
And when I know I have those things to do, oftentimes I'll just shut my door and just hammer it out. But also pray for an interruption. Yes.
You shut your door. It says "Do not disturb," but feel free to knock.
But if you're a kid, please do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If you could wave a magic wand and you could fix one thing about how middle school works, what would you change?
Yeah, that's good. I think we have an opportunity with the pandemic, with how we've changed education. I guess I would like to see us move more towards like a self-directed learning, a little bit more of that, maybe a hybrid model. And some teachers are doing that in their classroom. But I just would love to see us just system-wide maybe do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
I would love for us to maybe even start a little bit later in the day for middle school kids especially. There's just a lot of change going on in them. And so that would be a really cool thing in my opinion. So even going a little bit later in the day.
Sure.
So just some system things.
Sure. Absolutely.
I wouldn't change the kids. No.
Yeah. What do you see? What do you see coming down the line next maybe 3 to 5 years? What are some of the things you guys are going to be dealing with at Lewis and Clark that's going to be new? It's going to be different. That may be a bit of a hard question in the middle of a pandemic when we're just trying to get through day to day. But what changes do you see coming?
Well, I think we're going to be forced to change. I do. I think that we're going to have to change how we deliver instruction, how we deliver curriculum. I don't know if that's more online and in person, a hybrid model for lack of a better description. I see us doing more of that. I see things that are happening outside of education that are moving in that direction. Public education is such a big thing, and so sometimes it's hard to move the needle quickly.
Yeah.
And some of these outside groups have moved it rather quickly because they've had to, and they see an opportunity and they can respond to it quickly. And I see us maybe making some changes with that.
Sure.
I'm not a fan of us going 100% online because I do believe that we do need those connections with people. And I think oftentimes with online, we force people just further into their isolation. So I see us moving more towards a hybrid model, if you may.
Sure. All right. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for coming down and visiting with us today about what it's like to be a middle school counselor. I don't think it's an experience many of us get to have. So thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for all you do to keep those kids going, keep those kids working, and keep them functioning in the middle school. Thank you for all that you and McKinsey do down there at Lewis and Clark. Everyone appreciates it.
Thanks, Shoots.